Look, I know how you feel. Arcane was an absolute blast, and even if it hadn't ended the way it did, waiting for its second season would be utter torment. However, with Arcane ending in one of the most explosive cliffhangers I've ever seen, that torment just transformed into the 7th layer of hell. So we're all waiting for Arcane Season 2. And considering the immense production quality the show had, and the fact that we don't want any animators to get crunched, the wait could last for a little while. So, if we've got spare time anyway, why not use it to read some Arcane adjacent stories in the League universe? Whether you want to use Arcane as a gateway to jump into the depth of the League universe, whether you just enjoy Piltover and Zaun as a setting, or whether you're so desperate for anything Arcane related that you jump onto anything vaguely connected to it, these stories will build on what you already know through Arcane and expand upon the well-loved characters and the well-loved setting. Without further ado, here's my top 5 stories to read while waiting for Arcane Season 2. One of the relationships that were most enjoyable to watch unfold in Arcane was undeniably the one between Caitlyn and Vi, and that relationship, of course, also has its place in the League universe. While there hasn't been any romantic connection confirmed between them yet, the dynamic alone has been enough to spark the imagination of many shippers, which is true for both Arcane and the League universe. In the canon universe, Caitlyn has become the sheriff of Piltover, while Vi is actually part of the Wardens and serves as her partner. Watching them solve crimes together with their polar opposite personalities is extremely enjoyable, so perhaps it is not surprising that Child of Zaun, a story that features them doing exactly that, would also be very fun. While the dynamic and the mystery that they pursue is certainly already enough to make the story worth a read, Child of Zaun also explores the conflict between the Zaunites and Vi, who has now joined the Wardens and therefore, at least in the Zaunites' eyes, joined the other side, which also makes for some very interesting drama. Furthermore, there's actually another champion aside from Caitlyn and Vi in the story that definitely doesn't have the lowest chances of appearing in Arcane at some point, but I guess you're gonna have to find out for yourself who that champion is. Whether you just want to see more Piltover's finest in action, you enjoy untangling mysteries, or you want to see more of the conflict between Piltover and Zaun explored, Child of Zaun is definitely worth a read. While Ekko is a character that you will be very familiar with if you've seen Arcane, canon universe Ekko actually differs from Arcane Ekko quite a bit. That alone might have been enough for me not to include any Ekko stories in this list at all, if I didn't like Lullaby so much. You see, one of the main differences between canon universe Ekko and Arcane Ekko is that he, in canon, isn't an orphan. His parents are actually very much alive, and Lullaby is a story that explores Ekko's relationship with his parents. However, there's a bit of a twist to it. If you've picked up on the many instances of foreshadowing in Arcane, or if you already know him from League, you know that Ekko will invent a device that lets him manipulate time. In the story, Ekko uses this ability in an incredibly heartwarming way when interacting with his parents. How exactly you're gonna have to find out for yourself though. It's a very short read actually, so perfect even if you're not that big of a fan of reading. So honestly, I don't wanna hear any excuses. Go read Lullaby. Progress Day is an interesting case. Unlike many other stories that you find on the League universe page, it doesn't feature any of the champions as its protagonist, but rather an entirely independent character, a novice Piltover inventor named Tamara. What is the story about then, you ask? Well, Arcane already made you familiar with the plotline that Noxus wants to control Piltover for its technologically advanced weaponry through the character of Ambessa Medarda, the mother of Mel. Progress Day explores one of Noxus' attempts to infiltrate the city of Progress through subterfuge and deception, and consequently is a story riddled with mysteries and plot twists. The story may be a rather lengthy read, but it does create a lot of suspense through said mysteries and is honestly also a very exciting read. It also gives you a deeper insight into the everyday life in Piltover from a perspective that isn't as unique and different as those of the champions. If you liked Ambessa and the Noxian storyline she introduced, or if you're simply a fan of political intrigue and the layers of deception that go along with it, I think Progress Day may be the story for you. Singed is a character that you will also already be somewhat familiar with after Arcane, and while he may not be one of its main characters, he certainly has the ability to leave an impression with his reckless experimentation with Shimmer, sometimes even on living creatures such as Rio. Nothing he does in the show, however, is even close to the horrifying things that are described in The Host. The story is written from the perspective of one of Singe's victims, whom he is currently in the process of experimenting on. Singe is trying to fuse two different people together into one creature, with one of them serving as the physically strong body, whom he calls the Breaker, and one that will serve as the intelligent mind, whom he calls the Thinker. The Host has kind of gotten a reputation for being one of, if not the most horrifying story that League of Legends has to offer. And if you're not into that kind of thing, especially if you're not into body horror, I think you should perhaps stay away from the story. If it is your cup of tea, however, The Host can absolutely be one of the best stories as well, though. You know how these list videos go. Of course, before we move on to first place, there's gonna be an honorable mention. This time, I think it's for a pretty good reason though. The Jubilee job would have easily made this list. It's about a boy that accidentally steals from a chem baron, and is punished by having a chemtech heart implanted into his body that will stop beating if he does not steal the ashes of one of the recently passed members of an influential Piltover house before midnight. The story explores both Piltover and Zaun, highlights its division, and just all around carries a lot of the energy that Arcane has with it. Why is it not on this list then, you might ask? Well, the story actually isn't available on the League Universe page, but only in the Realms of Runeterra book that Riot released a while ago. I wanted all of the stories on this list to be freely available to anyone, so I decided to leave it out. However, if you already own a copy of the book, plan on buying it, or have a friend that could lend it to you, the Jubilee job is very much worth a read. So, we've got our first place then. If you've been following my League shorts, you will be familiar with the fact that I absolutely adore Camille's story, so it's perhaps not that big of a surprise that she did make this list as well. Those of you only familiar with Arcane might wonder who Camille even is, though. Well, Camille actually already got indirectly mentioned in the show, because in one of its first scenes, Mel is described to have some connection to House Pharos, one of Piltover's most influential houses. And Camille holds the central position of Principal Intelligencer in House Pharos, so there's actually a non-zero chance that Camille might appear in the show in the second season. The Weakest Heart starts with Camille being sent on one of her missions by her brother, but this mission carries particular weight for Camille, as there's the suspicion that perhaps Camille's former lover might be involved. The story explores the mystery-filled Victorian setting of Piltover's upper class, which means there's deception and plot twists at every corner. And unexpectedly, it also ends with quite the bang, that I'm of course not going to spoil here. If you're a fan of suspension-filled mysteries, want to know more about Piltover's high society, or just like a gosh darn good story, I think The Weakest Heart might be for you. And those were my top 5 stories to read while waiting for Arcane Season 2. Of course, while these stories might be very good, they can't really be a replacement for Arcane. But we've got to do something in the meantime, don't we? I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I would of course appreciate it if you could leave a like, comment or subscription to help me out, and I'll certainly be glad to see you again next time. Until then, stay delusional.